Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host, Paula Taylor, and this is episode 192. So, today we're going to talk about the paradox of self-sabotage. And this is one of those times when I'm going to I'm going to process as I'm talking. And I do this sometimes on purpose. Sometimes I wait until I've really processed through and I can kind of be really clear and give you like a smooth picture of what I'm talking about with my hindsight is 2020 sort of vision. And sometimes something comes through really freshly and it feels important to share it in the vulnerable space of the freshness of me still trying to figure this out, because it's important to see that and to understand that that's what this process is. No matter how long you've been doing this, regardless of whether you're a professional practitioner like I am, this work remains difficult, and sometimes it's existentially challenging. You're going to hear that word existential probably a lot today. And I've been hearing that a lot from clients. So I'm going to tell you a little bit vaguely about where this came from. And then I'm going to go into my personal example. And I will tell you that it took me probably an extra 10 or 15 minutes to psych myself up to do this episode, because I am feeling really vulnerable about it and a little bit dysregulated. And I also didn't sleep very well last night because a lot of this information was coming in while I was receiving. There was a huge influx of sort of upper chakra activation energy last night. And I was kind of in that. And then all of this was coming up. And then I was having these big aha moments. And it felt really important to share this kind of in the moment, like as I'm processing it, so you can see my process. Because sometimes, especially on social media, people only show their most polished selves. They only show us what they want us to see, what they want us to assume they are always like. And that is not life. And I am all about authenticity and transparency and vulnerability. And I have to live that. I have to be in the space of showing you that sometimes being vulnerable is really difficult, and it's also really important. So let's start like really general and then get more focused. So when I work with people, I do a lot of coaching work with people, and it's part of the energy work. It's funny, sometimes people come into my physical space and they're like, wow, we spent a long time talking. And I'm like, that is energetic movement. That is the beginning of a lot of my sessions in person. It's the bulk of some of the virtual sessions is like we're moving energy by talking through things, by figuring out. And some of that from my end, I was thinking about this. It's like a Jenga game. I'm playing energetic Jenga when I work with people, especially when they come in with like kind of like emotional, energetic stuff as opposed to kind of physical stuff. And there's always a physical component to all of it, but sometimes we identify the energetic underneath rather than the physical. And so it's backwards Jenga is what I'm doing. So when you play Jenga, it's that blocks game where you kind of stack the blocks up, and in the game, you're sort of pushing and pulling out these little pieces of the tower, trying to get the tower not to fall. In coaching work, we want the tower to fall. There's a reason that there's a tower card in the tarot, because when the tower falls, that is one of those limiting internal beliefs that is crumbling, that you've built all of this ego personality stuff around. And the only way to get under that, to truly excavate and release it, is to allow that structure to fall. And it's very challenging. It can be existentially challenging. We can have moments where like, I don't know who I am anymore. And so a lot of what I do energetically when I'm talking with people is I'm sort of poking on the little Jenga blocks to see whether they'll move. And especially at first, sometimes we're doing like true Jenga where it's like, oh, that one comes out and we pull that one out and we pull another one out. And pretty soon, just like in the game, you've pulled out so many of these little supporting structures that the next, what appears to be small block you pull out is going to make the whole tower crumble. And again, in Jenga, you're trying not to make it crumble. In this work, you are. But it sometimes takes us, we have to move a bunch of those because we have a lot of defenses. We have a lot of resistance built up. And so a lot of my work is kind of pushing on the little blocks and seeing like where they're going to move and what kind of resistance I get back. And when it feels appropriate and safe and like there's maybe a little resistance, but we can like pull out the block safely, then energetically, sometimes that's what I'm doing, whether it's through conversation or through body work or through a combination of energy and speech and activation, guided meditation, whatever it is. And sometimes I push on a little block and I get a huge amount of pushback. And sometimes it's like, oh, it's not time for that. And sometimes it's like, this is the one, this is the linchpin, this is the one that we need to pull out so the whole tower will crumble. And sometimes people aren't ready for that, and that's okay. And that's a lot of the times that's where people sort of stop seeing me, whether they're aware of it or not. Sometimes they are, and they just say, I can't pull this one thing out because it's going to crumble everything that I've built my whole essentially personality on. They don't ever really say it that way, but that's essentially what's happening. And so sometimes it's like we're kind of pushing and we're getting the easy ones out, and then eventually, like, we got to push on something that's really tends to be really triggering for the person, and that's where that existential thing comes in, because when your tower crumbles, it's not immediately apparent that you can just rebuild it, and it's not easy to rebuild it, and it takes time to figure out, like, what do I want my tower to look like now? Maybe I want my tower to be less structured. Maybe I don't want blocks stacked up. Maybe I want something that feels more organic, something that has more movement in it. So recently I was with a client, and I was doing the thing where I was kind of like pushing, and I could tell we were working around to the one block that needed to be pushed on. It was like, oh, that one comes out, okay, that one comes out, or like I was getting resistance back, and I was sort of doing my little sort of energetic Jenga where I was kind of pushing around, and then we got to the thing, and I didn't have words for this until like I went through this process myself, and I'm going to tell you a lot of specifics about that because I can share my story. It's not my job to share someone else's story. I'm just giving you kind of the context of where this came in. And this client did use the word existential when we sort of like found the thing that was going to make the whole tower crumble. But the interesting thing here, the paradox here, is that most of the people I work with and most people who are looking for help in like moving energy and expansion are dealing with self-sabotage. There's a reason you're stuck. I'm in a place where I'm stuck and I can't expand, and I don't necessarily, sometimes it's like I don't understand why, sometimes it's like I do, but I need help. Sometimes it's not even, they're not even in a space of realizing that they're stuck. That's the first kind of awareness that comes in. So what came through in this session was like this paradox of the very thing that scares you the most, that you have the most resistance about, the thing that you are self-sabotaging with, is the thing that you are here for. And I'm going to make this very specific. And it was one of those times, like, it happened with this other person, and I was like, well, that's interesting. And then it's like some time passed, and sometimes things are kind of going around in the back burner, and I'm not necessarily aware of them in my conscious mind. And then this huge activation energy came in, and I tried to go to sleep last night, and it like just wasn't happening. So I was like, oh, I'll do some meditation. And then I got into my heart throat area, and then like, bam, I saw this thing for myself. I saw what it was for me. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is that this is unique to you, but there's a vibrational pattern that is probably universal. So I'm going to tell you my specific thing because I can share that. But the thing that we found with my client is different. The thing that you have might be different. And also, every time we excavate, there's like a deeper layer below that of maybe a totally different belief or sort of a tangentially related belief. But it all revolves around this thing of like, the thing that I am the most afraid of is actually the thing that I'm here to do. It's part of my purpose. So let me tell you some specifics, because I'm just sort of talking really generally, and you might be like, what is she talking about? So I'm going to try to make sense of this, and I'm going to start where I started, and then I'm going to like take you through this journey. So if it's a little bit ADHD bouncing around, just bear with me, because this is important to understand too, that I do this professionally with other people, and I have other people who hold space for me, because sometimes we can't see that stuff. We need someone else to kind of like poke on the little block for us. And I still struggle with sometimes the exact thing. So it's the excavation, and then you get a little more clarity in the excavation, or like, you've sort of unearthed your archaeological item and you're brushing it off, trying to figure out what it was. So I'm going to tell you what I thought this was when I dug it up, and then I'm going to tell you what it was when I got clarity around it. And it is no she's always here, but my clarity bowl is right behind me. And before, I was sitting out in my living room, like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And she's like, don't worry, I got your back. Like, literally, she's got my back, which I appreciate so much because this is really vulnerable. So I was digging around, I was poking around on my Jenga tower last night because I was moving energy up through my central column, what some people call Kundalini rising. And I was doing kind of a exercise that I do a lot for that is sort of my default when I can't sleep. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll just kind of clear some energy and let some things go. And I got to kind of the heart throat area, and there was like a lot of bleckiness. That's the technical term. And I was like, what is this? And I could feel all the activation coming in. And then all of a sudden, I started thinking about this work with this client and this idea of, I didn't have the word paradox yet, but it's this paradox of the thing that I'm the most afraid of, that I have to heal my nervous system around, is the very thing I'm here to do. And I want to take you on the journey of like what this looks like, because it's not a linear journey. I mean, healing rarely is. It's sort of like an up and down and spiral and in and out, and then you have to rest for a while. So I've known for a long time that like my big fear, well, I'm going to tell you what I thought it was, and then I'll tell you when I excavated further and got the clarity what it truly is, because words and specificity is important, but this is pretty universal, so you might relate to this. So for a while, I've known that I have been dismantling fears around being seen, and you can interject anything in that space. My deepest fear is of, and it's at this current moment, and we've talked about a lot of these fears. You can go back to like the trauma-based fears series that I did, and we talked about things like, rigidity and scarcity. And there's like, you could insert lots of things here, but I'm just going to tell you my specific one as an example. And you could hear my throat is kind of going, ugh, because it's really vulnerable. So I've known for quite a while, or I've thought I've known for quite a while, that the deep fear that I've been dismantling is this fear of being seen. And I've really been working on this. And this is related to a nervous system fawn response. So that people pleasing response, this idea of like, I'm going to make myself small so that I'm less of a threat. So I'm going to assuage someone else's ego. I'm going to make them feel better. I'm going to please them. I'm going to do whatever they want so that I am not threatened by being too, like, I'm taking up too much space is another way to say this. There's lots of different ways you can say this until I get to the like really specific vibrational word that is for me specifically. So I've been doing this work for a while, and I've been doing this year, and I've been talking about how 2025 is all about taking your power back. I actually have notes for an episode I was going to do last week, and then I was going to do this week, where I'm like kind of looking back and talking about like, here are the steps we're going through to like reclaim our personal power, and not today. So here we are on this a little bit of, I was going to say impulsive. That's not right. Impromptu or a live channeling kind of track that is meant to be today. And I just trust that. So I've been dismantling this fear for a while around it's not safe to be seen. That's the belief that I've been dismantling. It's not safe to be seen. And I was kind of looking at this. I've been looking at this like in my childhood, and there's these like what some people call the witch wound things, where I was actually killed in previous lives for being a healer, for being like for being too seen, essentially. I've been thinking, and I've talked about this on other episodes. I have a guide that I call Jay, who other people call Jesus, and like there's a really good example of somebody who literally just got killed for being seen, for being too present. And there's more to it, and we'll get into that. So I've known that for a while. And then what happened, that this is what causes the existential crisis. So the first step here is like always awareness. Oh, yeah, I've got this really like deep-seated fear of being seen. And it feels like the foundation of like much of my personality that I present to the world is built on this fear of being seen. And this like making myself less seen or making myself smaller. I mean, at one point I physically had anorexia, and I was trying to make myself as small as possible. I was always dressing in a way that like I would try to blend in and not be seen and all of that stuff. And so I thought this was about being seen for a long time, and even like up until recently. And then what happened is, I was trying to get into this with the client, and it was like we were kind of bouncing all over the place and like pushing on all these different Jenga things. But there's a self-worth piece to this that cannot be skipped. That is very important, because there is a belief when you like, if I'm not safe being seen, and yet my worth is tied into being seen. There's like, that's the two sides of the coin. That's part of the paradox there. The paradox is much deeper, but this is the first layer of excavation, is like, okay, I have this deep fear of being seen. And also like, if I'm not seen, who am I? Like, where's my self-worth? I like, my worth lies in being seen. And this is something that is usually modeled to you in your childhood. And I'm going to go into that and kind of when I get to the part where I excavate a little deeper, but just briefly, like I was seen a lot in my young years and I was comfortable with that. And then I started getting a lot of criticism around being seen and being called things like you're a ham and you're overperforming and you're this and you're that and you're that. And so then I got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller because it wasn't safe to be seen. Because when I was seen, I received a lot of criticism around that. And especially like through the puberty years. And when I get to like the underneath vibration, we'll talk about that in a little more depth. So the first thing you have to do when you're dismantling this fear is like start owning your inherent worth. That like, if no one ever sees me again, I am no less worthy than I am right now, because I inherently am worthy. And we talk about this a lot about production, like I have to do, and especially from like in a masculine sort of active society, our production, our worth is tied to our production a lot of times. So this is like, this could be like, I have to give, I have to keep giving in order to be worthy. And like what you're maybe truly here for is to receive. Like this is where this paradox is. And or to give in a way that is equitable, that is a true exchange. So there's lots of different ways this shows up. I'm just telling you mine specifically to make this a little more concrete. So the first thing I did over this last year was start dismantling this idea that my worth was tied to something outside myself. And in my case, it was this idea of being seen. If nobody shows up for my event, I'm less worthy, because that happened a lot. And here's the thing that will happen, and this is part of the self-sabotage. So vibrationally, if I think my worth is tied to being seen and I don't think I'm worthy of being seen, then I'm not going to be seen. That's this paradox here of like, this is what I need. And also I'm not going to get it because it's not safe to be seen. So that underlying belief of fear is like vibrationally sabotaging the thing that you think you need for worth. This is where this starts out. So what happened, and I talked about this a little while ago, I think I talked about kind of having an existential crisis. It might have just been in the liminal, when we talked about living in the liminal. I got to this place where I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. Like I had a practitioner the other day, she says to herself, we're not doing this anymore. And so I've been dismantling this belief that like, in order to be worthy, I need to be seen. And what happens, like the existential crisis that comes after that, is that you're like, I started like wondering if all of the stuff I was doing like in my business was trying to feed this like need for worthiness, this need to be seen. And it was like, oh, maybe I'm posting on social media just because I need to be seen for my, in order to make myself feel worthy. Maybe I'm hosting all these events because I need to be seen. Maybe I'm trying to network and like grow my business because I need to be seen. And of course I want to pay my bills, and there's some scarcity stuff in there too. But I was like, I'm diving deeper than that in myself. And so it started to bring up this sort of existential like question of like, why am I doing any of this? Like, what is the reason that I'm actually doing this? If I'm no longer trying to prove my worth and I accept that my worth is inherent, like maybe I don't even need a business anymore. Maybe I don't need a social media presence. Maybe I shouldn't be doing a podcast. That's the existential sort of question that comes up, is like if I truly own my worth as inherent, why am I quote unquote doing anything? If I'm not trying to prove my worth, if I'm not trying to earn my worth, like I could literally just lie in bed all day and be inherently worthy. And that is the point in this, like, especially in the kind of like nervous system healing process where people encounter, we call it sometimes burnout or neurodivergent burnout or autistic burnout. It's like the things that you've been doing to try to earn your worth are no longer serving you. And in my case, and in the case of healing, it's like you've dismantled that belief of like it's not like it's not safe to be seen, and it's like, no, it is safe to be seen. Like, I've been working on that. It is safe to be seen. And being seen doesn't make me any more worthy than not being seen. And when you see that, that's where this, like, it's like, oh, well, then why am I working so hard to be seen? Like, why am I doing this? And there's this, like, again, it's like, is this even what I want to do? Is this what I'm here for? And then you get into this kind of really, this is the like renovation where you've knocked down all the walls and it's just dusty and you're like, oh, I don't know, what am I even doing? Why am I even here? And you start questioning your purpose. And this is really challenging, especially for the ego. All of this is challenging for the ego. I mean, the ego is the Jenga tower. And so when you knock the Jenga tower down, it will get rebuilt. Like, the ego is part of our structure, but it might get rebuilt with less blocks. Or again, it might be rebuilt with like a rooftop garden or something that's a little more organic, that really serves you more on a spiritual level, because the ego doesn't really serve us on a spiritual level. It serves us on like a physical level of safety. So when you start dismantling these beliefs about not being safe and realizing that like spiritually you're always safe, then you can get into this like existential crisis of like, well, what am I even doing here? Why am I here? So here's where the deeper excavation comes in of this like true paradox. And this is what was coming in last night. And then I'll tell you like when I focus down into like what this actually is for me, because it's deeper than just like being seen. So once you get through kind of the existential crisis, or you're like, for a while, like, I think you're just sort of running on the hamster wheel, like you're just doing the things you used to do. I made some changes. I stopped doing as many events. I sort of stopped advertising, and I was kind of like, well, people will find me when they're ready. And overall, I mean, some things did change. I always had a hard time getting people to show up to group events, but like one-on-one, people kept booking. Like, I didn't lose business. My business wasn't growing the way I wanted it to grow. And that's partly why I've continued to excavate this, because I am my business. Like, I am my brand. And so I have to keep excavating personally to figure out like why I'm not growing in my business, because it's a direct reflection of like where I'm trying to grow personally. So when this came through for my client, of this idea that like the very thing you fear is like what you're here for. It's beyond worth. It has nothing to do with worth. That's something that needs to get dismantled as well. But like when that existential question comes up and you're like, who am I? What am I even doing here? Why am I doing this? So I'll tell you what I thought this was, and then I'll tell you what I really figured out it is. But so if we're using this like fear of being seen, if that's my deep fear that I'm excavating, then my purpose here, it's beyond worth. It has nothing to do with worth. The reason I'm here is to be seen. And I was lying in bed last night, like, oh, I don't like that. And it was like triggering all the things about not wanting to be seen. Cause I'm like, well, if I'm really here to be seen, like, it always brings up humility and sort of trying to show off, because that was what I like when I was a kid. I got this a lot. You're such a show off. You're such a show off. And like, really, I was just doing what I was here to do. I was just like enacting my purpose. And that can be really challenging to people, because most people don't know what their purpose is, because they haven't done this excavation. And there are some of us weirdos who, like in my generation, we were called indigo children. And also now we're called like neurodivergent or neurospicy. And now there's crystal children, whatever word you want to use, whatever label you want to use. Some of us came in with a lot of clarity, sort of knowing from a very early age like what we were here for, and having that be shut down. So I was like ruminating on this and like, well, I don't know what this means, and this is really crazy. And while this was happening, by the way, and this is why this is important. This is why this is how, like, sometimes when people are like, we talked through that whole episode, we talked through most of that session and I didn't get any work. Like, that is the work. So while I was thinking through this, like talking through this in my head, huge amounts of opening were happening in my heart. Huge amounts of opening were trying to happen in my throat. We're not quite there yet, and we'll get there. And that's the other thing. It's okay to do this slowly. It's okay to do this over time. I've been doing this for 30 freaking years. And like, this process that I'm talking about right now, I've been working on kind of for this entire year and kind of the last few years. until like this is the real deep excavation. And the deeper the excavation gets, the bigger the expansion that follows is. That's why we do the excavation, to keep getting that beautiful expansion. And also, just for the excavation itself, I guess I should say, but I mean, really, it's to get the big expansion. So while I was thinking about coming on here and talking about this, and I was like, getting really like, I'm really sweaty and hot while I'm talking, and I'm still feeling kind of uncomfortable and not so much nervous system triggered now, but just kind of like, I was like trying to make sense of this, and I was having this huge opening, and I was like, what is happening? And what is this, a thing I've been missing all along? And is this what I should be telling people now, that like the thing you're most afraid of is the thing you're here to do? And what does that mean? Because if I'm here to be seen, like, what am I supposed to be, famous? Like, what does that really mean? And I was like questioning all of these things. And then right before I got on here, when I was like sitting out on my couch trying to get the courage to start, it like the last little piece popped into place. I'm sure it won't be the last, but another piece of the puzzle popped into place. Another piece of the Jenga the tower fell down. So I don't know, the Jenga reference is kind of gone. I realized that it's not that I'm here to be seen. I'm here to be heard. And that might sound like just a nuanced difference, because they're related. But when I even said, like, my whole throat is trying to shut down right now. So I know I've found the piece of the Jenga that really knocks the whole puzzle down. I have been desperately afraid of being heard, because I am here to be heard. And when you are living in your purpose, society is set up to brainwash you into thinking you're doing something wrong, because it is very threatening, especially for a woman, to know exactly who she is and what she's here for. So let's talk this through now that I've told you, like, now that we've gotten to the spoiler alert part. I want to trace this through my life for you a little bit, so to kind of understand this, and just to verbally process it out loud. Welcome to Paula's Verbal Processing Hour. So my very first memory that I've like recovered was actually being born and like being taken away from my mom. And actually I have memories in the womb, but like around this issue, my first formative memory, I was born late. I had meconium aspiration. They put me in an incubator, essentially. Took me away from my mom. They put me in an incubator. And this came through in a craniosacral session I was receiving. There were two nurses talking about taking me out of the incubator, and one of them said to the other one, "Oh, I can't stand that one. She's so loud. Let's just leave her in there." So talk about receiving messaging that it's not safe to be heard from an early age, because I was probably crying because I needed something, right? When you're an infant, you're completely dependent on the caregivers around you. And the signal to that is to cry. And I have a huge vocal volume. We're going to talk through that a little more. My voice carries, it always has, because it's supposed to. What? Yeah. So whatever I needed in that moment, maybe I was hungry, maybe I was thirsty, maybe I was just lonely, maybe I wanted to be held, maybe I needed to be soothed, whatever it was ignored and stated outright that it was because I was too loud. And in theory, an infant wouldn't understand that, but vibrationally, like, I remember this conversation. I saw this happening, and I felt myself receiving that, and I felt the first blow to my sense of purpose, that it's not safe to be heard. If I'm too loud, I won't get picked up. That's pretty part of the reason we're tracing this, is because like this is really obvious in my life, and it is that way on purpose, because part of my purpose is telling you what's happening to me so that you can see the reflection in yourself. That's part of this being heard. And then it gets even more weird and cosmic, and we'll get deeper into that. So then when I was young, the stories that I started singing before I could talk, I loved to sing. I sang all the time. People had really powerful reactions to me singing. And because we didn't think about sound the way that we're finally starting to again now, as like healing, it was all about performance, right? You sing to perform. You sing to go on Star Search. I've talked about that a lot, like that was my dream. Now you sing to go on American Idol or The Voice, whatever it is. You sing to be a pop star or a jazz star or a classical opera star, whatever it is. You sing to perform. And so while I was just vibrating, I was just sending vibration out into the world. That's the spoiler alert. That's the deepness. That's what I'm here for, is to send my vibration out into the world and to have it witnessed. I've jumped ahead, but that's okay. Because I was thinking about this last night and I was like, well, what does it matter if anybody actually like sees me and like aren't I just here to be who I am? Well, why would I be here in the physical plane if I wasn't meant to interact in relationship? And so the witnessing is a huge part of this for me. So when people witnessed me vibrating through my voice, which is my superpower, at first they loved it. They thought it was amazing, and I got a lot of praise for it, and I just kept doing it. And then at some point that changed to, wow, you're an amazing singer, you're so good at this, whatever it is, to, gosh, you're such a ham. Do you always have to be the center of attention? Why do you always have to be heard? Why do you always have to be so loud? Why do you always have to be talking about your feelings? Because that's part of being heard. And so slowly things started to get shut down. Then I went to school and I was the weird neurodivergent kid, neurodivergent in like a gifted classroom of probably mostly neurospicy people. But like I started learning that I was supposed to fit into this little box, and my big, huge vibrational voice does not fit into a box. It never has. I was told, your voice is too loud. Your voice carries. Use your inside voice. Like, you're too loud. I mean, I could just go on and on with all the ways that I was told that I was too much. I was too loud. I was vibrating too violently, too loudly, whatever it is. And this persisted to the point that when I was in high school, I actually developed nodules on my vocal cords and I could not even talk. When I talk, it's like sounded like this. I sounded like an old lady who'd been smoking for 60 years, for about 2 years. Not coincidentally, this is also when, I started having eating disorder things probably around 10 to 12, but that's when the eating stuff really took hold too, because being heard is so related to being seen, to being noticed. And so it's like, oh, every time I get noticed, I get negative attention for that. I get criticized for that. So I should stop being noticed. Or I'm going to be noticed, and this is the way it goes for overachievers. I'm going to be noticed for being the best at the thing that's in the box. I'm going to be the best clarinet player. Well, that didn't work because there was someone who was always better than me. I'm going to be the best oboe player. And like, yes, that was true in my high school. And then I went to like the regional and there was like some kid who just freaking prodigy. Like there's always someone that's going to be better than you at the thing in the box. That's how the box is designed. The box is designed to keep you inside the box and keep you in the hierarchy of continuing to try to climb this like endless ladder to nowhere. And like the truth underneath that is that there is no box. The box is completely artificial. So I am here to vibrate. And for me, vibration comes through sound. It's a literal vibration. There is also vibrations of light. That's like being seen or being noticed. They're all related. But for me, it's all about being heard and allowing my vibration. Whoa, I just had like the biggest head rush. It's all about vibration. I always say frequency is the future. And so I am here not only to vibrate, but to have that vibration received. And because of all of this negative feedback I got, especially around my voice and the way I used my voice and it being too loud and whatever it was, the way it stood out, like when you're in a choir, you're not supposed to stand out. So you have to try to, again, fit your voice into the box of the choir. I internalize this belief that it's not safe to be heard. It's not safe for your vibration to be witnessed. And that may be what's underneath all of these beliefs in whatever form they take, that my vibration is not safe to be witnessed, whether it's being seen, whether it's being heard, whether it's having abundance, whether it's getting close to other people and constantly getting hurt. Like the what's on top is very important, but like when you do the excavation far enough down, it's about like, I am here to share my unique vibration. And I have been told my entire life that it's not safe to do that. And that is the paradox of self-sabotage, because it starts out external and then it gets internalized. That is why the programming is so powerful. And that is why the system needs to be broken, because the system is built on this idea of keeping you in this box, keeping you small, keeping your vibration limited, keeping your vibration quiet, keeping it whatever, constrained. And so when you start to dismantle the belief underneath that, and you start to say, it is safe to vibrate, it is safe for me to be heard. Every time I say that, I get a head rush. It is safe for me to be heard. It is safe for me to be seen. It is safe for me to be noticed. It is safe for me to be abundant. It is safe for me to receive. It is safe for me to vibrate and to be witnessed in my vibration. The paradox part of that is that is the thing you are here to do. The thing that scares you the most is the thing that you're here to do. And people have probably said this, but this is one of those things that, like, when I got it at a visceral level, like, I was awake most of last night, just like, holy crap. And like, so much shift was happening. I got up, I turned my TV on, and the colors on my TV are totally different. We also had a timeline jump last night, but like, this is such foundational stuff. This is the lie about the Jenga tower. When you knock the Jenga tower down, there's the existential crisis, and it's a lot. I'm not negating that. I'm not discrediting that. I'm not belittling that in any way, because it's huge. And also, like, when you knock the tower down, like, holy crap, there's the mountain range, there's the beach, there's the, like, true divinity of my actual nature that somebody was trying to get me to contain in this little block tower. And I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm just not. And to the point that if that means my physical safety is compromised, I no longer care, because my spiritual safety is guaranteed. And I am here with a purpose, and my purpose is to vibrate. My purpose is to be heard. And so when I was lying in bed last night going like, oh my God, what does this mean? And because there's a lot of artifice in the way that people are seen. And this brings up another kind of story that's been coming up for me recently, is this idea that, like, oh, well, if people can't hear me or see me or notice me, then they're just not ready for it. And somebody challenged that the other day in a very, like, Jenga-y, poking way. And I was like, and basically they just said, who are you to think you know what other people want or need? And I'm like, well, that's my whole job. And I'm an empath, and I can tell, and I can feel it, and blah, blah, blah. And also, that's just another story. That's just another limiting belief that's supporting me in my own self-sabotage, is this idea that I know better than other people of what they can handle. If they come and they hear my vibration and they can't handle it, they might get triggered. They might not like it. They might come back. But I've been sabotaging myself to the point that they don't even show up, because that fear was still there. The fear around, it is not safe to be heard. It is not safe to be witnessed. I think there's something really powerful about the word witness, and my guides are kind of nodding, and I've got some tears. So this is the paradox of self-sabotage, is that the very way that you're sabotaging yourself, first of all, started outside of yourself. We've talked about that before. Like, I just came in using my big old huge vocal cords in my lungs. I also got a very bad flu around 8th grade, and it changed my voice. And then I had a lot of trepidation and a lot of fear around sharing my voice, because it was like clear as a bell. It was an angelic voice. It's still an angelic voice. It's just different because I've lived. And this weird obsession with aesthetics, I always have a hard time with that word, anesthesia, it's the STH. This weird obsession that's part of the box is that, and I see it now in the spiritual space, and I call it out sometimes, like, oh, if you're spiritual, you have to be wearing white. If you're spiritual, you have to not eat meat. If you're spiritual, it means that you practice yoga, whatever it is. There's all of these things that even within the so-called spiritual space, we're putting people in boxes and saying, well, if you're doing this, then you're not spiritual because you're outside of my box. That is the 3D. That is the all or nothing, the yes or no, the black or white. I'm done with that. I don't have time for that crap anymore, to be completely honest, within myself either. And that's why this is an internal dismantling, because it may have started outside of you and it may still be trying to be like supported and maintained through the messaging you receive from outside yourself, but you've internalized this to the point that you don't even need that messaging half the time. And when you start this internal, when you knock over your inner Jenga tower, sometimes the world around you is like super triggered because their Jenga towers, they don't want their Jenga towers knocked over. They don't want you like Godzillaing through the neighborhood, knocking everybody's Jenga towers over. And so sometimes they do withdraw from you, or they do get triggered, or they do not want to be around you anymore. And that's okay. I was thinking about this card earlier. There, I think it's in the Rebecca Campbell Work Your Light deck, and it says you're not for everyone. And this is why there's so many different vibrations, because everyone is here to vibrate and be witnessed. And there's billions of people on the planet. Somebody is going to witness your vibration and honor it just as it is, without you having to change it, without you having to look a certain way, without you having to sound a certain way, without you having to have a certain appearance of polishedness, polishitude, that's not a word, without you, see, with you being like, I don't know what I'm saying, and blah, 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 and I'm on an ADHD tangent. Like, not everyone's going to respond to that when they witness it. And the people who do are going to find the validation that helps them dismantle their own interior tower. Because your job is not to build your tower in the confines of what I'm saying. Our collective job is to knock all the towers over and be in this 5D space of true unconditional love, which is that I honor you for the vibration you are here to share, even if it's sometimes difficult for me to witness. I honor you for the vibration you're here to share, even if it's sometimes difficult for me to witness. They made me say that again. This is not an easy process. This is not necessarily a quick process. This is such an important process. This is why now it's always funny when I'm like, oh God, I got to say the thing. And then when I'm done, it's like, look, my vibration has been witnessed and my body is in alignment. This is the other thing, just briefly, that I want to say about this, because we talked a lot in the past, and I still bring this up for the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary quite a bit, this idea of like regulation in the nervous system and everything. So your dominant sympathetic response, which is either fight, flight, fawn, generally it's an active one, and then freeze is like, it's like your fight, flight, or fawn, and if that doesn't work, you go into freeze, or you're in that for too long, you go into freeze. Your dominant nervous system response is tied to this deepest fear. And it's all the same fear manifested in a different way. It just depends on the box that you were placed in. So, if you receive messaging that it was not safe to be heard, some people's response to that and the way that they were able to, they overcompensate. You're going to hear me even more. That's like a fight response. The flight response is just like, I'm going to run away to a desert island and live by myself. I don't want a desert island. I've been in the desert. I'm going to run away to a tropical island and live by myself. And then the fawn response is, I am going to make myself small and make you happy and make everything about something that's outside myself, essentially. I'm going to allow for my own discomfort in order to assuage someone else's ego. I'm going to ignore my own deep vibrational needs in order to stay safe by giving to someone else. A lot of times that's why this results in over giving. And to be very clear, again, this starts out outside of yourself. Like, I came in just screaming my lungs out like every other baby does, and then was shamed about that. I came in singing, was shamed about that. All of this shame stuff builds up until we're no longer in alignment with who we're meant to be. And the minute we're in alignment with who we're meant to be, like I just said, I was triggered when I started this because I was like, oh God, this feels very vulnerable. And talk about being seen and heard and noticed. Like, I'm telling people my deepest fears. And that's can be like, it's like giving people ammunition to come after you sometimes, is like what I hear other people say. I don't feel that as much. It just feels like I'm sitting here with no clothes on or whatever. It feels like naked. When I state my vibration, and I come back into alignment, my nervous system is calm. You are meant to be here vibrating in whatever unique way you vibrate, and for that to be witnessed. And when you are in that alignment, that is where your nervous system can finally truly heal. And you've got to do work around that to get there. There's a lot, all that internal dismantling and the nervous system re-regulation training. I mean, that all of that is valid. But the bottom line is, until you are vibrating in your truest, most authentic self, aligned with that purpose, your nervous system will never feel safe. And when you first start doing this, you will feel more unsafe than you ever had. I was more triggered when I started this episode than I've been in quite a while. Like the night that I was up all night, I think I mentioned I was up all night triggered. Like I was that triggered. Not quite, but I was pretty triggered when I started this. And as I talked through this and arrived at the truth of this and vibrated that out for you to witness, I am in the space of alignment where I am now doing exactly what I'm here to do. And my nervous system said, oh, yep, this is what we're here to do. And there's that 5D word. In order to get to that space, there's a lot of that excavation and that uncomfortable pushing on the little pieces of the Jenga tower and pulling one out and going, oh, there's that thing. Oh, and pulling the next one. Oh, there's that thing. And then eventually pulling out the one that knocks the whole tower down. And then, spoiler alert, there's probably another tower behind that one. Maybe it's not as tall. Maybe it's got less blocks in it. That's what this excavation process is dismantling this stuff to come back to the truth of who you are, which is that at your purest essence, you are here to vibrate in a certain way and for that to be witnessed. So, if you would like assistance in a group space with all of this dismantling work and realigning work, I would love to have you join me in the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary, where you receive the powerful guided meditations and activations that go with the full episodes, bonus episodes of the podcast, some exclusive live streaming that I'm working on, and then also some exclusive discounts and access to discuss all of this in a space that is intended to be supportive and is intended to witness your unique vibration, even if it sometimes feels triggering, because that is part of the 5D. So join us there. We'd love to have you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a beautiful rest of your day or evening, and I will see you on the next episode of Wind Down Wednesdays.